How was it for you learning German? Was that a difficult process?
Um, yes and well, no, just yes. I was gonna say
Just
yes
yes.
and no, but no, it's been difficult
Yeah.
for multiple reasons. On one hand, like for us, we all learn Spanish from basically elementary school through middle and high school. But the way that it's taught, I can't speak for the entire U.S., but I am pretty sure, like in most of the U.S., it's just not taught effectively, and so we never really learn it. And so, like you saying that English is kind of unique in not having a formal and informal way of speaking to each other, it's like I had no idea how languages worked. I just assumed that a foreign language is just translating our words and that's it. And so when I started learning German, that was my first experience truly learning a foreign language. I mean, I guess Spanish, a lot of the grammatical rules are fairly similar to English, whereas German is like, oh, I have to learn how to translate each one of these words and restructure my sentence to make sense for the German speaker. And then, oh, there's all these cases and there's formal and there's informal. So that all was a shock for me. And maybe for a lot of people who actually have foreign language experience, they would say like, well, no, duh. Like, of course that's how, but I had no concept of that. And so that was kind of a difficult hurdle to get over. I will say I'm very thankful for the way that I did it, doing intensive courses from the get go, and in German from day one, because that really got rid of a lot of the, I guess, crutch of, hey, I got a question. Can I just ask you in English because it's easier? It's like I wasn't allowed to do that. And so it forced me to really speak it. And then on top of that, in the courses that I was in, they were a lot of like refugees and people that were coming from all around the world in my classes. I think in my courses, I would have students from like 12 to 15 different countries in one class. And I remember like the first day I came into class, I sat down and I was just talking. I was like, hey, where are you from? Where are you from? And I turned to one guy, hey, where are you from? And he just like, no English. And I was like, oh crap. And then I realized half the class didn't speak any English either. And that was
Mm.
another ignorant thing of me, just assuming, well, most of the world has some grasp on English. And it's like, that wasn't the case, of course. And so then German kind of took on a new, I guess, life for me. And I wasn't just learning the language so I could speak with like Germans, but I was learning it because it became my common language with a lot of my other students in my class. And it was the only way that we were able to communicate. Um, so in a way, I guess I was almost going to say no because that made it easier in quotes because I was forced to use it that way. But because of my lack of any kind of language knowledge, it was really difficult. And German itself um, is a difficult language to learn. I know there's more difficult languages out there than German, but it's a pretty difficult one to learn. And so now I feel like my biggest struggle is just confidence, just getting the confidence to look stupid speaking sometimes and saying, I know I'm going to look stupid and just accepting that. Um, that's what I was saying. Like, I still, like, I have a C1 certificate saying that am C1 and to a lot of people's standards, maybe not everybody's, that's should be fluent, but it's still the confidence that I really struggle with now and just actually doing it.
It's a vulnerable thing, isn't it, to speak another language? You really have to
Yeah.
like let go of your ego. There's no way that those two like you can't maintain your ego in your native language in a foreign language for very long because you just realize like, I'm not quite as charismatic when I'm speaking a language that isn't my own and I lose some of my personality in that and stuff. But I mean, C1 is a very, very high level. I mean, C2 is like native, right? And so, yeah, it sounds like you speak German very well. I mean, 6 years in, do you use more English or more German in your day-to-day life?
So we're in a unique situation where we live in Germany, there's actually 50 to 60,000 Americans that live in our area. There's a huge NATO base nearby. It's Ramstein Air Base. And so the area that we live is extremely used to massive loads of Americans living in the area who come here for the military sends them here for like 3 years. And so they all learn Hallo, Auf Wiedersehen, Tschüss, and then that's it. But they all will try it. And so the Germans here are used to like, okay, you said hello, now let's just speak English. Like let's just
Mm.
move on. And so in a way, the area that we live in has made it very difficult to learn too because, like I said, I can speak it, but my accent is still so strong. They hear my accent and they assume, oh, you're like the other 50,000 Americans here who speak the basics. So they're always kind of like, let's just speak. And so like anytime now where I go into a restaurant or a shop and I speak German and they continue in German, that's like a little moment of pride because like, okay, again, I know I haven't fooled you, but you at least recognize enough that like I've said things close enough to like sounding proper and my grammar is good enough that like you've said, okay, yeah, he speaks German. And so I definitely have reached a point where that happens a lot more than it used to, but still the area that we live in has made it very difficult. So I jokingly say now Tuesday nights is when my social club meets and they're all Germans. I speak German on Tuesday nights and the rest of my week I speak English. I'm self-employed too, so I work at home. So I'm not speaking to Germans in my day-to-day life. You know, we speak English at home, of course. My boys, I try to speak German with them, but they hate it. They always just ask me to speak German to them. And even our midwife that helped us whenever we had our boys, she stopped me one day and she was like, do not speak German to your boys because they will only learn really bad pronunciation. And I was like, okay, I'll note that. But so yeah, in my day-to-day life, I speak German. A lot of it it doesn't go much deeper than the ordering at a restaurant, ordering at the butcher, things like that. Except for like, yeah, on Tuesday nights when I have my social club and I am actually like conversational with everybody. So yeah, the area doesn't help.
Does your wife speak German as well?
She understands a lot, but speaking it is just not quite there yet. Yeah.
Does that kind of create a bit of a divide in your social circles? Like if you have German friends, like maybe some of your friends that you meet up with on Tuesday, and then you want to hang out and have a few beers at the house, is there an awkwardness of like which language should we be speaking to include everybody?
Yeah, I feel like there have been those moments for sure. Most of a lot of Europe, Western Europe, and then especially like Germany, most Germans have a pretty good grasp on English. And so a lot of people just kind of default like, well, let's just speak English because we know everybody understands English whenever we're socially hanging out. But yeah, we do have some friends that I've met that don't speak great English and they're German. And so they prefer if we speak in German. And then there are times where, yeah, my wife is kind of left out, I guess, in that conversation. And then we try to do some English. And I used to not like that because I felt like it created kind of like an awkward, like, okay, every time we got together, it's like, oh, are we going to speak German or are we going to speak English? And then there kind of just got to be a point where it's like, nah, just going to accept the awkwardness and we'll just balance in between. And sometimes like, you know, I can express myself obviously much better in English since it's my native language. And I know a lot of times for a lot of people, it's easier to understand. And like you can read it or you can hear it, but then speaking it is kind of the difficult part. And so there are times too with some of those friends where it's like they'll speak German to me and it's easier for me to say it in English and I know they'll understand it and then they'll respond in German. And we'll kind of go that way sometimes too, where we know each other's understanding each other, but we also understand that you express yourself better in your language. So
yeah, you lean into the things that you're like stronger in, right? Like I'll speak the language that's my own, and then I can understand, you know, what you're saying when you're speaking your language. I did have experiences like that in Germany where not a ton, but sometimes I made a rule for myself before I went on the exchange program that I would only speak German with German people. That's because I really wanted to improve my language abilities. And so I would do that and I would really stick to that. And I remember there was this one guy that lived in the same building and I would do that. I would just speak German with him. He was a German guy and he would only respond in English. And I kind of like took a little bit of offense to it, I think, because I was like what you were saying, where sometimes you get the impression that they don't think your German is good enough for the conversation, or they're like, you don't really know that much, just like speak English. But I was like, I made this rule that I'm only going to speak German. So like, hey, here we are, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm only speaking German. And so we just did that for like a month. It was just like, he would speak English, I would speak German, and we would just do that. And I was like, yeah, whatever works. You can't control what language other people speak, right? So it's just like, just do you. And I knew that he was going to understand me if I spoke German, and so we just did that. But yeah, there's unique challenges to learning a language that has a high level of like English proficiency in the country. I think like when I went to Colombia, because I lived in Colombia for a few months, it's like 5% of the population speaks English. So like there was no resorting to English, and no one was ever switching to English because no one spoke English. And so that's like, it's nice in that you can get as much practice as you want without having to worry about which language you should be speaking. But it's also heavy that like you're just locked in this language now. Like there is no backing out. There's no easy way out. There's no one's helping you translate words. Like, and being on the phone was horrible. Like ordering some food for takeout or something was like nerve wracking. Trying to say like the address and get all the numbers right and stuff. And so there's like pros and cons to both, I think. I think you learn more in an environment that has less English, but it also weighs on you a little bit heavier in that there's no way out, right?
Yeah, and we've tried to take the mindset of, we know we have that crutch with most people in the area where we could speak English, but also like, especially whenever I made it my mind to try to get German citizenship, it's like, okay, like I am now an immigrant in this country. I mean, I was an immigrant when we arrived, but now that I'm trying to become a German, like we need to speak German. And so I have a lot of those situations exactly like you described, where I'll go into a shop and I'll speak German. They'll hear my accent. They'll start speaking English, and I'm just kind of committed to German, and they're committed to. And I know most of the time they're trying to help me out. They're trying to be nice, and so they'll commit to speaking to English, and I'll just stick in German. And then it's like, why are you a German speaking English and I'm an American speaking German? Like, this doesn't make sense right now. But like, we're both in this battle, and we're not going to let down either of us. So that happens a lot. But yeah, but the other element too that I did not expect was the amount of like dialects that Germany has as well. Again, speaking English, I guess I was aware that there are English dialects, but for the most part, I feel like it's like their accent differences. And then sure, in England, they call them, chips rather than French fries. But like, I guess in my mind, I didn't think of that as like a dialect. I just thought of that as like, we just, for whatever reason, have different words for the same thing. But then when I came to Germany, that's where I learned a lot about dialects too. And in the area that we live in, everybody speaks some form of, it's called Pfälzisch, and it's an extremely strong, difficult dialect. I say strong, that kind of sounds like an accent, but it's much more than an accent. And so that's on like Tuesday nights. I say I go and speak German. They all are speaking in the local dialect. There's a few of them, and they all have, some ability, of course, to speak standard German, so that if they need to help me out, they can. But also, like, when you have a room full of local speaking in dialect, I'm not going to ask all of them to switch their language just to help me out. And so that's been the other big battle that I've had is, okay, when I'm outside of the social club, I struggle with getting people just to speak German to me. And then when I'm in the social club, I struggle because they're all speaking in a dialect that I didn't learn. And so now I'm having, it almost feels like I'm learning another language on top of learning German. But that's been fun too, I guess.
So that's in southern Germany where they speak the Pfälzisch.
So this southwest Germany, but it's very specific to like, so like the state we live in is called Rhineland-Pfalz. And it's just the southern little portion of our state speaks this dialect. It kind of bleeds over into the state next to us, Saarland, and then bleeds a little. But even within that, there's differences. There's a story. One of the first places we lived in, our landlady grew up in our village, and basically there's two villages next to each other, and the governments of both of those villages kind of joined together so that they could get city status in the country. But there's like a clear piece of farmland that divides our villages. And some of the words they use between those two villages are different because the dialect like is so specific to each village sometimes as well. So anyways, so it's just this small little piece of Southwest Germany. It's not even like Southwest Germany as a whole, because there's a lot of other dialects. I drove an hour away to go to a store one day, and I was just trying to make small talk with the Germans, and I was asking them, so do you guys speak Pfälzisch here as well? She's like, no, Pfälzisch ended like halfway on your journey over here, so just an hour away, it's a completely different dialect already.
Wow. I mean, like, I know it's more complicated than just like north and south, but like in my limited experience with Germany, I always associated like the southern part of Germany to be much more like more dialects, I guess, than the north. Because like I was in like near like Bremen, Oldenburg, and up there it's like they call it like the cleanest German is what they say, right? Where it's like there's not a lot of dialect. It's very standard, like normal, like whatever, regular German, I guess. And there's not a lot of dialect influence. Now they have a little bit of influence from like Low German, and sometimes older people would speak that, but like it was very much like just your typical what book German that you would learn in school. And then when I would hear people from the South, like Bayern and stuff, and they were like Servus and like saying stuff like that, I was like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, what is that about? So I always like associated the South with more dialects, but I don't actually know if that's accurate or not.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, so Hanover is where people are supposed to speak the most pure, perfect standard German. But when you look into the history of why that is, because so standard German colloquially is called Hochdeutsch, right? Which is High German, which is geographically the south of Germany. So that's where it's supposed to come from. So Hanover is supposed to be, I can't remember if it's Middle German or Low German. Geographically, it's a lot lower in elevation. And so the theory is the reason why Hanover and that kind of area speaks such good standard German was because their original dialect was so vastly different from standard German that they all had to learn standard German perfectly to be able to actually communicate with the rest of Germany whenever they spoke standard German. And so now they just speak perfect standard German. So it wasn't that their standard German or their dialect is standard German. It's just that their dialect was so far off that they learned standard German perfectly is what it's supposed to be the historical, I guess, theory.
And their like original dialect is gone now.
Essentially, yeah. And North Germany, like you get up to like, really low German, so like Plattdeutsch, that you actually, it's not even considered German, and it's not even a dialect of German. It's just its own language now because it's so different. So I definitely, I know like Bavaria, like which in and of itself has multiple different dialects. They have Frankish, Bayerisch, Bayerisch, and there's a bunch of different ones in there. That one kind of gets stereotyped as like the most difficult one to understand because it's such a strong, hard accent. But I think a lot of times even North Germany, they have a lot of things that they say too that's like the rest of the country, you're just not even going to understand it. It's just everybody has their own flavor that they speak that it's fun.
A big thing there was like moin. Like that was their greeting for any time of day. Moin. And so I think that's like a typical like North German thing, but I felt lucky because it was like pretty easy. It was pretty easy to understand. Like the accent was pretty straightforward, I think. And
I think a lot of people, when they do come here, they unfortunately don't even get to contact that because as soon as a German knows that you're a foreigner and then you say, I want to speak German, they'll immediately just speak standard German because all Germans speak. And a lot of the dialects are kind of in a way dying off in a lot of areas because it's like, well, why would I learn a dialect? And if I could just speak standard German, all of our media is in standard German and everything. So dialects mostly are taught in the home. And so anyways, yeah, but a lot of foreigners, unfortunately, don't even come in contact with it because most Germans speak standard German. So they'll just speak standard German.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, yeah, once you get into those inner circles where they all are speaking it, that you're suddenly thrust into the crazy world that's German dialects. Yeah.